So in this week's interview, I had the opportunity to sit down with my wife, and we just kind of discussed some of her upbringing, some of the things that she has faced and has still come out on the other side being the person that she is. So I just want to highlight the fact that you can go through things in life, you can deal with a lot of things, but don't look at life as that it's over. You know, a lot of people who have went through similar things continue to complain, continue to dwell on these types of things. Here's something that I know about my wife, and I just wanted to kind of pull out of her to be able to show people some of the things that she has went through and some of the things that she has faced, so that if anybody is out here facing anything similar to this, then you can know that there's hope on the other side. And so one of the things that we are not trying to do is to paint a picture of people just being bad. But, you know, the thing that we want to point out is that how you can go through the things that you go through in life and still come out on the other side solid, regardless of who's done what to you and how things have been. And so I hope that this video will encourage you. And I just, the goal is to just show people that no matter the adversity, you can push through. So, yeah, enjoy the video. Okay, so what is your name and where are you from?
My name is Rosezeta Williams from Louisville, Kentucky, born and raised.
So, Rosita, what was your childhood like?
My childhood was rough, dysfunctional, unstable. Um, and to go a little deeper, I say that because I came up from a very rough upbringing. My biological father and my mother were separated from me being at an early age. I don't really know too much of the history with that, but I do know that I was very young. I was in the care of my mother, who was an alcoholic, and she was abusive physically. She would neglect us, leaving us at home by ourselves over a period of days at a time. We were in and out of the home of the innocents.
Do you have anything that just kind of stands out to you of just some of the abuse from your mother? Not to put her out there, we all have our different lives and stuff. We have the things that we go through and stuff, and we can only do what we know. But, you know, like, are there any things that, you know, abuse wise that probably stood out to you that, you know, was just something that you just remember and that you would be willing to share?
Yeah, there's a lot I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I remember she was very physical. Um, so when she would, and she was mostly abusive and, ugly when she was under the influence of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like when she wasn't drinking alcohol, like when she was sober, it was like her best nature. She was the most kind person.
Mm-hmm.
She was very friendly. My mother had a lot of people in her circle.
Mm-hmm.
She was liked by a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people. Um, but also, in that stage of soberness was when people wanted to deal with her, people enjoyed her, people wanted her around.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was drinking alcohol, she was just totally different. It was night and day. Um, she was just real mean. She was always like ready for a fight, like physically ready for a fight. And she just didn't care. She didn't care who it was. She didn't care what ties you had. Like, alcohol just made her a totally different person.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, like I remember one thing in particular, my mother sharing that. So as I mentioned before, I had an older sister, but she wasn't in the home. Although she was young, she started having kids of her own at an early age. So she got out of the house and was on like, the government assistance. So she was able to have her own place and she wasn't in the house. So that left me, my older brother, and then we had the baby brother and the two girls who were the set of twins. Um, the girls were babies, and then I had the younger brother and the older brother. But my mother would always voice that she couldn't stand girls. And that girls, she hated the girls, but she loved the boys, and the boys were her world. So I remember that, and along with that, like I remember her treatment. I remember her actions to go along with that. Like her actions proved that, she hated the girls, and at the time, I was the girl that was there to take the abuse that she had to dish out. Of course, the twins were babies, so she couldn't do the things to them that she was able to do to me. And when I say physical, I remember whoopings with extension cords. I remember there was an incident, my mother put a cigarette butt out on my bare skin. So those are types of things that I talk about, think of when I use the word abusive. Um, and then I remember like a time over in Beecher Terrace across, well, at the park where Baxter's Community Center was, there was a like a little wading pool. And my mama had been drinking, and so she was drunk and she was going through whatever she was going through. But I remember her walking me over to that pool and trying to drown me. Like literally, she was dunking my head under the water. And then some friends of hers, um, they had been hanging out with her. I think they left for a period of time and was coming back anyway. But just so happened at that time they were coming back and saw what was going on, and so they rescued me. And they were on her, talking to her, like, what are you doing? You don't do that. They were getting on her about that and stuff. But I remember that very vividly. And then like things like my mother always hung with males. Um, she was more of a guy's girl than she was a girl's girl. So, like, her friends were mostly males. And so I remember she would have males over to the house. We lived in Village West. And I just remember one time she had left us for a few days and she had come back home. I think she was coming back home to kind of check in and get cleaned up and change. She had a couple of her male friends. And I remember this one big, nasty, yucky looking guy. He was big, and like as a child, he just looked disgusting. Like I remember he was big and could barely walk, could barely breathe. And he sat in the front room where I was. And I just remember him looking all nasty and like a little, heavy breathe.
Yeah.
And he kept trying to get me to come to him, and I wouldn't come to him. So he called my mother, and he was telling my mother basically like, your daughter's being rude. I'm trying to talk to her and she won't talk to me. Like, tell her to come on over here and talk to me. So my mother was like, if you give me your liquor, whatever liquor he had left, she was like, if you give me your liquor, then I'll call her over there. And he was like, okay. So he gave my mother, I remember him handing her his bottle of liquor, and my mother made me go over there to him, and she walked out of the room. And so when she walked out of the room, I remember him trying to like stick his hands in my pants and grope me. And so eventually, like, I squirmed and ran away, and I went upstairs and was hiding in one of the bedrooms where I bumped into my older brother. And I was telling my older brother, like, don't tell mama where I am. That man down there, he's looking for me and he's trying to touch on me. And so, yeah, that nothing became of that further than that. But yeah, I remember things like that. So yeah, I remember a lot of things, but those are some of the things that stick out more so to the forefront. Um, Remembrance that I have spending time with my biological father. Um, I remember having some time with him where he would pick me up and spend some hours with me throughout the day. But whatever issues he and my mother were facing, that didn't last too long.
And so, did you live your full like childhood with your parents and stuff or whatever? What happened to? I know a little bit of your history. I know a lot of your history, so I ain't gonna front like we ain't married. But like, so what are some of the things that you had faced? Did you like live your full childhood with your parents? Like, what were some of the things that you know about your parents?
So, no, I didn't live my full childhood with my parents. My father was murdered. Um, I guess I was about 4 or 5. He was murdered. And the time that he was alive, as I said, he and my mother weren't together. They weren't an item anymore. So he wasn't in our household. Uh, it was my mother caring for myself and my other siblings. She was an alcoholic, and due to some of her neglect and abuse, that brought CPS in the picture. And down the road, we were in and out of the home of the Innocents, which eventually led to us getting taken away from my mother. So we were adopted out of her care. I went to my father's brother, who's my uncle, and his wife. And that's where I was raised in their care at the age of 6 or so, until I decided to leave their home, which was probably about 18 or 19.
Okay. And so, Ro, like, yeah, I know a lot of, just the history with that, but explain. I know you talked about being adopted by your father's brother and his wife. So, did things get better? Can you kind of tell me a little bit about your experience in being adopted? And so, first of all, were all of y'all kind of adopted or just kind of went out from your mother's care and stuff through like the CPS situation and stuff?
So all of us, myself and my siblings, were taken out of my mother's care. My older brother ended up being adopted by my older sister. And somewhere down the line, one of the twin girls was separated from the family. There's still some mixed information about, what exactly happened. For a while, I know I was led to believe she was deceased, due to an illness that she received while she was a baby. In one of those times that my mother had left us alone over a period of days, and she had gotten sick, and we were left to care for her. But I do remember that time she was sick, but I just don't know, what happened
Yeah,
from there on. So I do remember for sure, though, I don't remember her being in the picture
gotcha,
for a long time.
gotcha,
Yeah, and then eventually later in my years, found out some other information that likely she wasn't deceased in the times that I thought she was. But for sure now she's deceased.
okay,
But so that left my younger sister, the other twin, and my younger brother. They were adopted together in a separate home, outside of family. Um, to answer your other question, when I was adopted by my uncle and his wife, did things change? My uncle was just like my mother, just like my mother. He was a hardcore alcoholic. He was very abusive. Our house was known as the house on the block. We lived in like a little cul-de-sac, and our house was known for the man that, got drunk and was irate and used to beat his wife, his family. The police were always there because that's the kind of attention that my uncle brought forward. He was like my mother in a sense. When he would drink, he would get real, irate and vicious. And he would be physical. He would beat us physically. Um, yeah. When I first went into their care, they didn't have kids, so it was just me. And I can't say that I remember it immediately, but it seems like it was immediate enough that I remember, like, it seems like since I had been staying with them, since I had been in their care, I can remember abuse. And I can remember, talks about don't tell, school, don't say such and such at school, don't say such and such to other people. Um, I would be allowed to go spend some weekend time with, like, my sister. Um, and, she had kids my age and stuff. And so, I was briefed, so to speak, don't talk about such and such and don't show such and such. Sometimes I get whoopings from my uncle, and sometimes I would have marks. I would have marks where, he would use a belt, or uh, one time he used like a little ruler, but yeah, just times like that, I would be briefed on what to say and what not to say, what to stay away from, and all that kind of stuff. So, and that went on the duration that I lived in their household. Even after, I think I left their home when I was 18, 19, and their children who were left in the home were still enduring those things from my uncle. Um, yeah, so yep, it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't too different. Um, I think the difference, if I would say anything, would be there was more stability as to, we were taken care of. I had the necessities that I needed. I had running water, I had food to eat, I had clothes to have on my back. I had a place that I could call home, as far as feel secure, that I had somewhere that I knew, when I get out of school, I'm guaranteed to come home to a place where I had lights on, where I had running water, things like that. Yeah.
So I know being over there, and not just being there, but just through life, there's been a lot of abuses in your life. There's been a lot of things that you've had to deal with. And so I know some of it was sexual abuse. And just to kind of give any viewer just, um, I guess, just a little bit of insight into some of those situations, could you just like briefly discuss some of the type of sexual abuse that you had, um, just received like outside of the home and different things too? Just, I know there's been a lot that has went on, and yeah, so could you kind of?
Yeah, so there's been a lot. So, like, even inside the home, like the example I gave earlier of my mother allowing her male friend, like, over some liquor, like, yeah, go get her, that just, it's there. It's like right there in my mind. And then there was a time that my uncle tried to make a sexual advance at me. Um, and I think that time I was 12, 11 or 12. Nothing happened from it, but because I spoke up and I shared with my aunt, hey, this is what happened, this is what he said, this is what he did, and he wants me to meet him in this place at a certain time. And so she was able to, be like, no, you stay in the bed, you don't do blah, blah, blah. I'll make sure I'm up. And she confronted him with that. So nothing became of that. and it never happened again. And so outside of the home, around age 14, I was raped, and I was raped by an older guy. And as a result of that rape, I ended up pregnant and had to get an abortion at that age. And then further along in my life, I was older, I was out on my own, and I experienced another rape. And same thing with that, I ended up pregnant as a result of that rape, and ended up having to get an abortion, or not having to, but I chose to get an abortion. So yeah.
Bro, you've been through a lot, and I know your story. I know some of the things that you have experienced, and a lot of times, people who know you know how joyous you are, how smiley you are, how loving you are. Like, how do you do that? Like, in spite of all the stuff you've been through, like,
I honestly have nothing more than, it's just the grace of the Lord. Like, I've suffered through and battled with for the longest. Like, Lord, why me? Why does these type of things had to happen to me? And I remember even getting in the church and like really becoming aware and committed to like following God and being encouraged to share my testimony. And I remember like, no, like fighting with the people of the church, the elders that's telling, baby, do this. It's for the good. And I just remember like, what's good in that? Like, these things that happen are not good. These aren't things that you want to share and tell people about. And I really wrestled with that. Even before that, like even being younger and going through and thinking through, like, it just really made me at one point like question God, because we were always in the church, and my granny would always talk about God. Any time we said we wanted to go to church, she would make that happen. I might not talk to granny in a year, but if I call her today and be like, I want to go to church, she's going to make it happen. She's going to make sure I get there. But with that, granny would always, talk about how good God is, how God is in control, how God is your help, and how God loves you. And so experiencing the things that I experienced, like one thing I used to question, I feel like in the short time that I got to spend with my daddy, I remember, as young as I remember what seemed to be like the joy he had in having me with him, the pride he had in sharing with folks, this is my baby girl. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can remember him taking me around people and showing me off and bragging on me. I can remember him like having me by his side like I was just, like this lamp that he just needed to show off, that he was so proud of. And the fact that he was taken out of my life at such an early age for me, and this is the rest of the life that I had to endure growing up, enduring the abuse from my mother, later to enduring the abuse from my uncle, later to enduring the abuse that I faced out on my own and all that stuff. I'm like, God, why would you do this? Like, if you are so loving, if you love me so much, then why would you take me? Why would you allow me to go through all these hurtful things? Like my mother, the mother you gave me, now I'm talking to God, the mother
Yeah.
you gave me, like she voices very loudly and clear and unapologetically how she hates the child that you gave her, you know. And saying like the only place I remember feeling loved and wanted was my daddy, but you took him out of my life. Like, what's going on, you know? And so just really wrestling with God. And then, like I said, in that time when I did get into the church, trying to figure out like, what is so good about a testimony? Well, I just think one day it was like a bing, like a light bulb moment, like one of those aha moments. Um, I really feel like the Spirit enlightened me on one, and I want to kind of be careful how I say it so I don't, mislead. But God is wise enough to know what will draw us to Him. And I don't feel like I was, running rampant and wild out here in these streets. But for sure, I was lost and I was apart from God. And this is the stuff that started to turn my wheels about things, thinking deeper. Okay, like, let me figure out the character of God because it ain't what I'm thinking or what I thought it was or what I feel like has been told to me it is. And so, with that, and walking forward and trying to learn more and trying to grow closer to God, I feel like God enlightened me like this is what I needed, me personally, what I needed to be able to be open to see Him, to hear Him, to grow closer to Him. And I'm not saying like I needed to be raped to notice God. You know what I'm saying? But the experiences that I've had to wrestle through, I feel like that's what I needed for my personal encounter and growth toward Christ. So with that, I just ran like, like, seeing that part and then understanding that my experiences, although as hurtful as they were, as bad as they may have seemed and were, I'm not downplaying that at all. It was encouraging to other people. It was needed for other people. And I'll never forget one time we were at this church and we have like a gathering where we were taking different turns on this specific Sunday when we have our gatherings to share testimonies. And this Sunday happened to be my time to share my testimony. And I was real, nervous and kind of feeling like I don't want to share because I don't want to be judged. These are people that are, I felt like are totally disconnected from the culture that I had to go through, the struggle that I had to go through. So I'm just thinking, they're going to judge me. They're not going to understand, yada, yada, yada. And so when I shared, I remember like when we dispersed to go fellowship and eat and stuff, one lady had come up to me and she was like, I just want you to know, she looked me in my eyes and she was so genuine and so like full of empathy when she shared. She was just like, I just want you to know, like, I thank you for sharing. I've never been through too much of anything, but that encouraged me. That opened my mind and my eyes to see that even though I haven't went through things, there are people who are going through things. And not only going through, have gone through, and not only that, that they can come out like on the brighter side of things, you know what I'm saying? And she was saying the same thing, like, you've been through so much. I don't understand how you're this bubbly person, this joyous person to be around. Like, I need this. I needed to hear your story. I needed to walk through this experience through your sharing with you. You know, it was very helpful to me. So I feel like, again, like it's just the grace of God, because there were times before where I struggled with, like, I just want to give up. I contemplated on suicide, and I was telling myself all these things. Nobody will never notice. Nobody cares anyway. Nobody wants me. I feel like I've always been the black sheep of my family. People had the perspective that the uncle and aunt that I was adopted by had more than what they did, were happier than what they were. They just had this whole perspective that I lived in a world that was so good and so loving and so caring and so financially stable and whatever else they thought, you know. But that wasn't the case at all. That wasn't the case at all. And because of their perspectives, I think they kind of formed the opinion over me that, you know, I thought I was better than everybody because I had this and I had that. And the reality was I didn't. I was probably suffering more and going through more than what they were going through. And nobody ever knew. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, bro, I just, like I said, I know a lot, and I've seen you, and I see your walk, and I never hear you dwelling back on those things. Like, I know, people who have had experiences and, have dealt with so much in life, and I think sometimes they let that define them. But I think what I've seen you do in marriage, yeah,
you gotta stop this.
I think what I've seen you do in marriage is nothing short of amazing. And so, like, God has really worked through you to just do, like, so much, and to know your story. Like, there's a lot of struggles, there's a lot of stuff that I dealt with. And for you to teach me a lot and show a demonstration of what love looks like in spite of the things you have been through is just like crazy. And yeah, but like, you are an amazing woman. You are just what, like, our family needs. And so we definitely appreciate you. We appreciate you for everything that you've done. We want to love you. We want to walk with you through life and continue on in life with you. And I think, I just wanted to do this interview just to show people and to give people a little glimpse of some of the things that we know about you. So the bubbly, the loving person that you are, the way that you just, when people know you or see you, they expect just the excitement. They expect the loving. They expect the big hugs. They expect the big smiles. They expect you to just go out of your way to love people. And so, yeah, I think it's just a testimony of what God has done in your life and what God continues to do in your life. And none of us are perfect. We know that. But yeah, just thank you for being the person that you are. Thank you for never giving up. You know, just thank you for being I feel like you are the person who really holds our family together. You are the glue. Like, there's so many nights that I've waken up and you've been praying for us. there's so many nights that I've waken up in the middle of the night and you are just over there praying for us, and I can hear you praying for us. I can hear you like talking to God for people. And yeah, like regardless, like God has used you. And just like I say a lot of times with Joseph, the things that people had meant for bad, God has turned
Mm,
around and made for good.
mm.
And you are a walking example of that. And so, yeah. So we just love you and we appreciate you. And so, for anybody who is viewing this video, I have some links down into the description. Well, for anybody that's watching this video, I have links in the description where you can follow my wife, Rosezeta. You can follow her channel and just get to know her a little bit better. But I just wanted to highlight just some of the things that God has done through her and the way that He continues to use her. And so,
Hmm.
like there are countless amounts of people who, are just inspired by you. They are encouraged by you. They are loved by you. And you have walked so many people through life. And I think sometimes you don't know how valuable you are to people. And so, yeah, I think like God is continuing to use you. So know who you are. Like, don't be afraid to speak your gifts. Don't be afraid to use your gifts. Don't be afraid to tell your story and just to put it out there
Mm-hmm.
for people because God is using you. And so, like I always say too, a lot of the things that we go through are not necessarily meant for us.
Yes.
They're not meant for us to hold on to. And
Right.
you are a prime example of why I'm doing a channel. And it's just stories like this that people need to hear and to be able to know that there's hope outside of whatever it is that they are facing or will face. So yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
we just thank you for showing up. Thank you for just taking the time to do this interview. And yeah, so you are my wife. I love you, and yeah, let's
I love you back, husband.
call it a wrap. But yeah, so all
Thank
right,
you for having me on your channel.
yes, ma'am. Yeah, all right. So until the next video, we are out.